Hello, I hope you are doing well. My name is Jacqueline Vino from Galasso Learning Solutions, and welcome to the Genuine Learning blog. Today we are going to discuss two very interesting hot topics, which are the two exposure drafts that were issued by the AICPA and NASBA. The first one we're going to talk about is the CPA Competency-Based Experience Pathway, and the second exposure draft that we're going to review together today is the proposed changes to the Uniform Accountancy Act. Now, if you are somebody who has been following the AICPA's National Pipeline Advisory Group, or NPAG for short, this definitely isn't something that is a huge surprise, right? Something we've been kind of anticipating now for quite some time. Based on some of the research that the NPAG has conducted, they basically concluded that the cost and the time required to earn a master's degree needed to get a CPA license was actually a pretty big issue that was impacting the pipeline. It was also a pretty big deterrent for accounting majors who were trying to decide whether or not to pursue a CPA license. So this new competency-based pathway is one of those proposed solutions to the problem. So we have a lot to cover during this blog. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So here is our first exposure draft. The first thing we're going to outline together is this CPA Competency-Based Experience Pathway. Again, this is something that was proposed by both the AICPA and the NASBA jointly. They are very much seeking alignment on this issue. So why are we doing this, right? This new pathway is trying to provide some flexibility for CPA candidates by providing an alternative pathway to get a CPA license. I also want to clarify that this additional option does not replace the current existing pathways to licensure. So you can still earn a master's degree, or you can still earn that bachelor's degree with an additional 30 credits, right? That is something that is not going away. But now we sort of have this new third option to respond to some of the market changes and expand opportunities for the next generation of accountants. So the AICPA and NASBA, they're just trying to address some of those financial and time constraints that some candidates face when they are trying to complete their education that is needed after earning that bachelor's degree to achieve that license. So what we are going to do together is walk through what this new pathway entails, what does the requirements look like there. And although this is a more flexible option that is being proposed, it has definitely been met with some controversy. So when we're outlining what some of those requirements are, we're also going to talk about what some of the criticism is on this proposal. So if a CPA candidate chooses to pursue this proposed competency-based pathway, what would that actually look like for that candidate? So the first requirement that they have is they still have to complete a bachelor's degree at a college or university. So that is not changing. That is going to be pretty consistent across the board. Additionally, they need to complete 1 year of professional general experience. That is also pretty much the same, right? That's not something that's changing. They also still need to pass the CPA exams, also something that is not changing, right? That CPA exam is not going anywhere anytime soon. And then the fourth requirement that they need is exhibiting competency in specific professional and technical areas. So there's two categories of competency that they have to be able to demonstrate, right? First the professional, then the technical. And this is basically where there is some controversy, right? People have some concerns that trying to certify this competency for their employee is going to be cumbersome, that it might be subjective, that it's going to put an additional burden on the employer. There's also some concerns over the risk that people are just going to simply check the box and move on and not really read into what this is. There's also firms that have voiced concerns that they don't want to certify competency due to some of the risks that are involved. So there's definitely some criticism for this. And as I mentioned, there are two areas that competency is going to have to be demonstrated in. The first one is technical competency. So the candidate needs to be able to demonstrate competency in, audit, assurance, tax, and financial reporting. So whatever their chosen area is, they have to have competency in that area, and also professional competencies. So this would include ethical behavior, critical thinking, effective communication. And basically, you need to complete 2,000 hours of performing services in their field. So whether it's audit, assurance, tax, financial reporting, and you also need to work with a CPA evaluator, and that's really important. So basically, the evaluator is who is going to complete a form on the candidate's behalf and send it to the state boards. So also, if you want to take a look at what that form entails, it is actually included in the exposure draft. So if you pull up the exposure draft and go to Appendix B, it basically outlines all of the forms that need to be filled out for this. And as I previously mentioned, there are some concerns around how subjective this might become, right? So how do we know if a candidate is going to exhibit, critical thinking skills or effective communication, for example? The exposure draft does outline some of the behaviors and tasks that a candidate should be exhibiting, but it is definitely not as, clear cut and dry as somebody passing the CPA exams or earning a master's degree. So it's kind of a completely different way of doing things than from how we did things in the past. Additionally, this is also going to have a really large impact, right? Initially, people think, oh, this is just going to impact the CPA candidate. It's not, right? It's going to impact them for sure. That's the first party it's going to impact, but it's also going to impact the employers that are hiring these candidates, the CPA evaluators who are going to be filling out this competency-based form and sending it into the state board. It's going to also impact the boards of accountancy, right? This is kind of a new form that they're going to be dealing with and a new process. More broadly, it's also going to have an impact on the entire accounting ecosystem. It's going to impact colleges and universities. So very, very large impact if this proposal is going to be eventually approved and passed. So this leads us to our second exposure draft, which are proposed changes to the Uniform Accountancy Act. This was issued September 30th of this year. And once again, just like the previous exposure draft that we went through together, this is something that was proposed by the AICPA and NASBA as one, right? So they acted jointly in this. The UAA is also known as the Model Act, kind of goes by a variety of names. But basically, because we have this new competency-based pathway, that means that the Uniform Accountancy Act is also going to need to change to include this new pathway to licensure. So what are some of these proposed changes that we are seeing in this exposure draft? First, it's going to, specify education requirements needed to sit for the exams. It's going to define those new requirements if you're going to choose that competency-based pathway, retain mobility for those licensed under a pathway that is defined in the Uniform Accountancy Act. And kind of the area where we've seen a little bit more controversy as well is clarifying the process by which a CPA can practice under mobility. So the biggest concerns that we've seen in this are around that concept of substantial equivalency and mobility. So substantial equivalency is what allows a CPA to practice all across the country. So for example, when I was working in public accounting, my office was located in Tampa, Florida, but my client was actually headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona. So my team would travel there all the time. Substantial equivalency and mobility is what allowed that to happen across state lines. So what NASBA is proposing is actually a national license database. So in essence, NASBA will be determining substantial equivalency with this national license database, and there's concerns that it'll be effectively taking some of that responsibility away from the state boards of accountancy. And all of this, once again, gets further complicated with a new competency-based pathway, right? So how do we ensure that they are substantially equivalent to somebody that earned a master's degree? So there's definitely some concerns in this area as well. So right now, the AICPA and NASBA are currently accepting comments on these exposure drafts. If you want to submit comments, you can do so by December 6th for the competency-based pathway exposure draft. And if you want to respond to the Uniform Accountancy Act proposed changes, you can do so until December 30th of 2024. And we also have links to the exposure drafts as well. So if you want to actually read them yourself, if you're going to be a CPA evaluator and you want to look at Appendix B and see what that form actually looks like, you can click on one of these links here and actually go and check those out yourself. I would definitely encourage reading the entire exposure drafts just because there is a lot of really interesting information in there and they are currently accepting comments, so why not? And that concludes our blog for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As you can see, lots of very interesting hot topics right now. But once again, my name is Jacqueline Vino from Galasso Learning Solutions. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you on a future blog.